Chapter 1. The Night That Shouldn't Have Existed. Everyone would later call it a mistake, a word soft enough to dull the sharp edges of sin, a word polite enough to hide obsession, longing, and the slow rot of desire that had been festering for years inside the imperial palace. The victory feast filled the grand hall with music and wine and false laughter. Chandeliers burned bright above silk-clad nobles who toasted the empire's triumph, their voices loud enough to drown out the unease curling beneath the celebration. At the center of it all stood Kael Aurelion, Alpha General of the Empire. Golden-haired, sharp-eyed, posture immaculate even while surrounded by chaos, Kael looked every bit the war hero the Empire adored. His uniform was immaculate, medals gleaming against his chest, cape thrown back like a challenge. He smiled easily, but those who knew him well understood the danger of that smile. Kael Aurelion was gentle by nature, but never harmless. Across the hall, watching him with a devotion bordering on reverence, stood Lucien Valemont, Enigma King. Lucien did not drink. He never needed wine to lose control. His eyes followed Kael with predatory patience, dark and unblinking, drinking in every sarcastic tilt of Kael's mouth, every dismissive laugh, every careless touch when nobles crowded too close. To Lucien, Kael was not a stepbrother. He was oxygen. Lucien had loved him for as long as he could remember. From the moment the disgraced Alpha boy had been brought to the palace, too proud to bow properly, eyes sharp with defiance despite wearing borrowed clothes, Lucien's world had narrowed into a single, terrifying truth. Mine. Their father, the late emperor, had known. Everyone had. The court whispered about the Enigma prince who followed his adopted brother like a shadow, whose gaze softened only for Kael, whose temper flared violently whenever someone dared flirt too boldly with the Alpha General. Kael, for his part, pretended not to notice. Or worse, noticed and mocked it. "You're staring again," Kael said lightly, lifting a goblet and taking a slow sip of wine. His voice carried easily through the noise, casual and sharp all at once. "If you keep that up, people will start assuming things." Lucien stepped closer, his presence heavy, territorial. "Let them." Kael snorted. "Careful, Your Highness. Kings aren't supposed to pine after their generals. Very unbecoming." Lucien's mouth twitched, not in amusement but hunger. "You enjoy provoking me?" "I enjoy living," Kael replied sweetly. "And you look like you might strangle the next noble who breathes near me." "Only if they touch you." Kael leaned closer, eyes gleaming with mischief. "And what if I touch them?" Lucien's hand tightened around his goblet. The crystal creaked under the pressure. Kael smiled wider. Menace. Absolute menace. The night blurred beneath wine and music and years of restraint wearing thin. Kael drank more than he should have. Lucien watched him do it, calculating, waiting. Every laugh Kael gave, every careless brush of skin, every teasing remark chipped away at the last of Lucien's control. When the feast finally ended, it was Lucien who followed Kael down the quiet corridors. Not with force, with inevitability. "You shouldn't be here," Kael muttered when he realized Lucien was behind him, voice unsteady. Not frightened, but charged. "And yet I am," Lucien replied softly. The palace was silent. Too silent. Kael turned, eyes sharp despite the wine. "This is a bad idea." Lucien stepped closer. "Say it again." Kael opened his mouth, then closed it. Too many unspoken years pressed between them. Too many stolen glances, too many nights Lucien had waited outside Kael's chambers like a faithful hound. Too many mornings Kael had pretended not to see the devotion burning in Lucien's eyes. When Lucien touched him, it was reverent. When Kael let him, it was disastrous. The world narrowed to heat, confusion, and the snap of something irrevocable. By dawn, the illusion shattered. Kael woke first. Reality crashed down hard and merciless. Horror, regret, panic. He dressed with shaking hands, every movement sharp and efficient, the way he prepared for battle. He did not look back. He did not wake Lucien. He fled. Lucien woke alone and smiled. He stood by the window as Kael disappeared into the waking city, cloak drawn tight, shoulders rigid with resolve. There was no anger in Lucien's eyes, only certainty. Kael thought the night had been a mistake. Lucien knew better. The bond had already tightened around them, silent, inevitable, forever. "You can run," the Enigma King whispered to the empty room, voice soft with devotion and promise. "But you are already mine." Chapter 2. The Runaway Alpha Prince. After that night, Kael vanished from Lucien's sight, but not from his reach. At least that was what Lucien told himself. Kael avoided the palace corridors where the crown prince walked. He stopped attending late councils. He resigned from private audiences, claiming border inspections, military drills, anything that would keep distance between himself and the Enigma, whose gaze burned like a brand on his skin. Lucien noticed everything. The way Kael no longer met his eyes. The way he flinched, just barely, when Lucien stood too close. The way the bond between them hummed faintly, unsettled, as if waiting to be acknowledged. It only made Lucien more possessive. The truth came quietly, cruelly. Kael had been sparring with Duke Rowan, his oldest friend, and the only man foolish enough to treat the Alpha General like a reckless younger brother, when dizziness hit him hard enough to drop him to one knee. "Kael?" Rowan caught his arm, brow furrowing. "You look like hell." "I'm fine," Kael snapped automatically, then swallowed hard as nausea rolled through him again, sharp and unforgiving. He barely made it to his chambers before retching violently, sweat breaking out along his spine. It happened again the next morning, and the next. His temper shortened, his senses sharpened too much, scents lingered too long, taste turned metallic, and his body felt wrong, not injured, not ill, but changed. Kael knew warfare, strategy, bloodshed. He did not know this. When Rowan finally dragged him to a discreet healer, one loyal enough to keep his mouth shut, Kael expected a tonic, maybe an accusation of overwork. Instead, the healer went pale. "My lord," the man whispered, hands trembling over the diagnostic sigils, "you are with child." Silence crushed the room. Kael laughed once, sharp, disbelieving. "You're mistaken." The healer swallowed. An Enigma's heir. The signs are unmistakable. The world tilted. An Alpha carrying an Enigma's child was not impossible, but it was dangerous. Catastrophic. The child would bind him irrevocably to Lucien. Kael's hands clenched. The palace had already begun to rot. Whispers slithered through marble halls as news of the late emperor's death spread. Ministers sharpened their knives, already speaking of alliances, of suitable queens, of daughters suddenly presenting as omegas and betas through dubious means. Lucien ascended the throne under mourning banners, and Kael watched from the shadows as nobles circled his stepbrother like vultures. This is it, Kael realized grimly. Lucien would be crowned, and Kael would be caged. The bond would be used against him. His child would be used as leverage. His body, his title, his freedom, offered up in the name of empire. He could already hear it. For stability. For the future. For the crown. Lucien would never let him go. And that terrified Kael more than war ever had. He left without ceremony. Without farewell. Without warning. One night, Kael stripped his chambers bare of anything personal, left his military insignia behind, and walked out of the palace under a false name. Duke Rowan covered his trail, burning records, rerouting patrols. "I'll buy you time," Rowan said quietly at the gates. "But not forever." "I don't need forever," Kael replied, lips quirking despite everything. "Just long enough." The north welcomed him with silence and snowless winds. The Aurelion estate, once grand, now forgotten, stood weathered but unbowed. Kael reclaimed his title not as general but as Lord Aurelion, a noble who had lost everything once before and survived. He raised his child alone, gentle hands cradling a life he had chosen to protect at all costs. Sharp wit deflecting questions he refused to answer. A smile that fooled servants, neighbors, even himself. Sleepless nights became routine. But he never regretted it. The empire, meanwhile, burned. Lucien's grief turned into fury. Ministers vanished, borders closed. Spies were dragged screaming into dungeons. Nobles who had dared speak of queens were found stripped of titles or heads. Lady Seraphine, the spy master, knelt before him, eyes lowered. "We are searching every province," she reported. "The Alpha General left no trail." Lucien's hands curled around the armrests of his throne. "Then make one," he said coldly. She hesitated. "Alive, Your Majesty?" Lucien's gaze darkened, something feral flickering beneath the surface. "Alive," he repeated. "Unbroken. Mine." And somewhere in the quiet north, Kael pressed a hand to his stomach and whispered a promise to the life growing within him. "I will never let him cage us, even if the Empire itself had to fall trying to take him back." Chapter 3. The Emperor finds his treasure. 3 years passed, and still, the search never ended. The Empire flourished under Emperor Lucien Valemont, expanded borders, stabilized trade routes, conquered rebellious territories. History would remember him as a brilliant ruler, a monarch forged in discipline and blood. But behind closed doors, the truth was simpler. Everything he built for Kael. Every road extended northward. Every alliance questioned for loyalty. Every province audited for rumors of a golden-haired alpha with sharp eyes and sharper tongue. Lucien had grown taller, broader, colder. His boyish sharpness had hardened into something lethal. Ministers bowed lower now. Nobles trembled more readily. Yet the obsession remained untouched by time. If anything, it had deepened. Lady Seraphine, his spy master, knelt before him one storm-heavy evening, her voice measured. "The northern estates report unusual activity, Your Majesty. A minor noble household. A child." Lucien's fingers stilled. "A child," he echoed softly. "Yes, 3 years of age, silver-eyed." The room went silent. Lucien stood so abruptly his chair scraped harshly against stone. His heart, trained to remain calm even in war, stuttered. "Prepare my cloak," he said. "No escort, no banners." Seraphine hesitated. "Your Majesty, I will see him myself." The Aurelion Manor basked in late afternoon sunlight, vines climbing its stone walls, roses blooming untamed along the garden path. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. Lucien stood at the iron gates unseen, watching. There by the old oak tree. Kael. He wore no armor now, only a simple uniform suited for training. Not a general's, not a noble's. His hair was tied loosely at his nape, face relaxed in a way Lucien had not seen in years. And beside him, a child. Small hands fisted in Kael's sleeve. Soft laughter spilled from Kael's lips as the boy tugged insistently, demanding attention with the confidence of one who had never known refusal. "Elias," Kael said fondly, crouching. "If you keep pulling, you'll rip it." The child huffed. "You promised." Kael sighed theatrically. "I promised one more story." Lucien's breath caught. Silver eyes, Lucien's eyes, lifted and met his from across the garden. The world tilted. Lucien did not remember crossing the distance. He remembered Kael stiffening. Remembered the way Kael's hand moved, instinctive, protective, to shield the child. Remembered the boy peeking out from behind Kael's leg, curious rather than afraid. "Papa?" the child asked softly. "Papa." Lucien nearly fell to his knees. That night Seraphine confirmed it. "There is no doubt," she said quietly. "Lord Kael fled while pregnant. The child is yours. An Enigma Alpha hybrid. Strong. Exceptionally so." Lucien dismissed her without another word. He locked himself in his chambers. And for the first time since childhood, since his father's cold lessons and cruel expectations, Lucien cried. Not from grief, from vindication, from overwhelming, bone-deep joy. Kael had carried his child, had endured pain, fear, exile, and given Lucien an heir. A royal child, powerful, beloved. Lucien pressed his forehead to the cold stone wall, laughter and sobs tangling in his chest. "You ran with my heir," he whispered hoarsely into the dark. "My treasure, my blood." His hands curled, possessive even in solitude. "Now," he said softly, reverently, "you will come home with him." Kael tucked Prince Elias Aurelion into bed that night, brushing curls from his son's forehead. "You were very brave today," Kael murmured. Elias yawned. "Was that scary man angry?" Kael smiled, though his eyes were sharp. "No, my love, just persistent." "Like you?" Elias grinned sleepily. Kael laughed softly, pressing a kiss to his temple. "Exactly like me." As Elias drifted to sleep, Kael stood by the window, watching shadows stretch across the garden. He had known this day would come. He had simply decided when. And far away, an emperor planned not a war, but a homecoming. For his Alpha. For his son. For what had always belonged to him. Chapter 4. The refusal that drove an emperor mad. Lucien did not come with chains. That was the cruelest part. He came with silk words and imperial seals with banners of truce and a proposal written in his own hand. He dismissed half his guard at the gates of the Aurelion estate, stepped into Kael's home not as a conqueror, but as a man certain of victory. Kael received him in the manor's solar, sunlight spilling through tall windows, dust motes drifting lazily between them. He was calm, too calm. Dressed simply, one hand resting on the back of a carved chair, posture loose in a way that would have unsettled any courtier who understood war. Lucien saw none of that. All he saw was his Alpha. "I will make you my consort," Lucien said without preamble. "My queen." He spoke as though the words were a blessing already accepted. "You will have a crown, absolute protection, and authority equal to mine. Elias will be acknowledged as crown prince the moment we cross the border." Kael tilted his head, expression mild. "No." The word landed softly. Lucien blinked once. "You misunderstand." Kael smiled, gentle, infuriating. "I don't." Lucien stepped closer, his presence heavy, Enigma aura rolling through the room, territorial and vast. "Kael, this is not a request. I am offering you everything." Kael folded his arms. "You're offering me a gilded cage." Lucien's jaw tightened. "You would rather raise my heir in exile?" "Our son," Kael corrected calmly. "And he's not in exile. He's home." The refusals did not stop there. Lucien returned again. And again. With gifts Elias adored. Hand-carved toys, enchanted books, miniature swords forged by the imperial smith. Elias accepted them with wide eyes and innocent delight, climbing into Lucien's lap without fear. That, more than anything, nearly broke him. "Papa Lucien," Elias said one afternoon, tugging at Lucien's cloak, "will you stay?" Lucien looked at Kael with naked longing. "I would never leave." Kael poured tea, unbothered. "Careful, you'll confuse him." Lucien's fingers curled into the fabric of his gloves. "He is my son." And I am still saying no. Sarcasm sharp as steel. Gentleness wielded like a shield. "You don't love me," Kael said one evening, voice even as he stood by the window. "You're just obsessed." The words were not cruel. They were precise. Lucien froze. Something in him, carefully contained for years, fractured. "I love you," Lucien said hoarsely. "I have loved you my entire life." "You love the idea of owning me." Lucien's control snapped. The Empire felt it immediately. Borders closed overnight. Trade routes were frozen. Armies mobilized not toward enemies, but inward, encircling the north like a tightening fist. Ministers gathered in terror as Lucien tore through councils, eyes cold, voice lethal. "I want every road watched," he commanded. "Every port, every mountain pass." Lady Seraphine hesitated. "Your Majesty, the people will panic." "Let them," Lucien snarled. "I am not hunting rebels. I am reclaiming what is mine." Duke Rowan rode hard to Kael's estate, dust-coated and furious. "The Emperor has lost his mind," he warned. "He's turning the Empire inside out for you." Kael listened, expression thoughtful. "He always was dramatic." Rowan stared. Kael, this is war. Kael looked out at the garden, where Elias was chasing butterflies, laughter ringing like bells. No, Kael said softly. This is a tantrum. Lucien came again. This time without gifts. This time with fury barely leashed. You are tearing the Empire apart, Kael said mildly. Lucien stepped into his space, towering, eyes blazing. For you. Kael did not flinch. That's obsession. Lucien's hands trembled. You belong beside me, on the throne. Our son belongs there. Kael met his gaze, unyielding. And what if I don't want to be your queen? Lucien's voice broke. Then I will make you. The words echoed, ugly, honest. Silence followed. Elias chose that moment to run into the room, skidding to a stop between them. He looked up at Lucien, silver eyes bright. Papa Lucien, he said seriously, are you angry again? Lucien dropped to one knee instantly. No, he said, softer than Kael had ever heard him. Never at you. Elias nodded solemnly, then grabbed Kael's hand. Papa says shouting is bad. Lucien laughed weakly, tears burning behind his eyes. Kael watched it all, every crack, every fracture. And still he did not run. He stayed. He waited. Because Kael Aurelion knew something Lucien did not yet understand. This was never about escape. This was about when the Emperor would finally kneel, not in rage, but in surrender. And when that happened, Kael intended to decide the terms. Chapter 5. The Truth That Rewrote Everything. Lucien cornered him at last. Not with armies, not with threats, but with desperation so raw it stripped the Emperor bare. It happened in the Aurelian Manor's war room, the same room where Kael had once planned border defenses and rebellions. The maps were gone now. Candles burned low, rain lashed against the windows like an omen. Lucien stood at the center, cloak discarded, crown abandoned on the table as if it were nothing more than an inconvenience. You win, he said hoarsely. Say it. Say you want me to stop. Kael leaned against the table, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Lucien's eyes were wild. If you want me to leave, I will. If you want the borders opened, I will open them. If you want the Empire, take it. Silence. Then, Kael laughed. Softly, cruelly. It echoed like a blade sliding free of its sheath. Lucien stiffened. Kael? Kael lifted his head, eyes gleaming. Not frightened, not cornered, but amused. You really thought you were the obsessed one, Kael said lightly. Lucien frowned. What? Kael straightened, every trace of gentleness slipping away. What stood before Lucien now was the Alpha General, the strategist, the man who had never lost a war. I loved you first, Kael said calmly. The words hit harder than any blade. Lucien's breath stuttered. From the moment you hid behind that pillar in the palace gardens, Kael continued, voice steady, almost fond. The day my family fell and I was dragged into your father's court like a liability. Lucien remembered. The lonely Enigma prince. The proud alpha boy who refused to bow. I knew we were fated, Kael said. I knew before you ever did. And I knew something else too. Lucien swallowed. What? That the moment you became emperor, Kael said softly, they would force you to choose another. A queen. A broodmare. Someone obedient. Yeah? Lucien shook his head. I would have never. So I made sure you couldn't, Kael interrupted gently. Silence crashed down. I let you follow me, let you watch me, let you fall, Kael said, tilting his head. I fed the obsession because I knew you'd survive it, and because I knew you'd never love anyone else once you did. Lucien stared at him, horrified, and utterly undone. The night, Kael added, voice lowering, was not planned. Lucien exhaled shakily. But my escape? Kael smiled. Very much was. Lucien took a step back, laughing weakly. You're telling me? You ran because... I ran because I needed you to become unstoppable, Kael said. An emperor who would burn the world for me. For our child. Lucien's knees hit the floor. The sound echoed like a verdict. I didn't run because I was afraid of you, Kael whispered, stepping closer. I ran so you would never be able to live without me. Even the timing where your spies would found me again and report it to you. All these are orchestrated by me. Quote. Lucien broke. He laughed, wild, breathless, tears streaking down his face. You manipulative, he breathed, looking up at Kael with reverence and awe. Cruel, beautiful Alpha. Kael crouched before him, brushing a thumb beneath Lucien's eye. And you're still kneeling. Lucien grabbed Kael's wrist, pressing his forehead to it. Marry me. Kael snorted. That wasn't even a question. The wedding shook the empire. No quiet ceremony, no compromises. Lucien crowned Kael Empress Consort before the entire court, declaring their bond ancient, unbreakable, fated. Nobles who protested were removed before they finished speaking. Elias toddled down the aisle in miniature ceremonial robes, crown slipping over silver curls. Papa, he announced loudly, pointing at Lucien, don't cry. The emperor laughed through tears. Kael smirked. Told you he was dramatic. Lucien kissed Kael before the crown ever touched his head. Possession, devotion, triumph all tangled together. The empire cheered and whispered, because they finally understood. Lucien Valemont ruled the empire. But Kael Aurelion? He had orchestrated the emperor's heart from the very beginning, and Lucien had never been happier to be owned. Epilogue. A crown claimed willingly. The empire changed quietly. Not through war, not through blood, but through certainty. Kael Aurelion returned to the capital not as a fugitive, not as a general, not even as a prince, but as Empress Consort. The title settled on him as though it had always been his, the crown light against his hair, the weight of it nothing compared to the devotion in Lucien's gaze. The court watched with bated breath. The Alpha who had once defied the throne now stood beside it, unbowed, unbroken, smiling faintly as though he knew a secret no one else dared to guess. Lucien ruled the empire. Kael ruled Lucien, and neither of them pretended otherwise. Prince Elias Valemont Aurelion was crown prince under a sky clear and bright, silver banners snapping in the wind. He stood proudly between his parents, small hand clutching Kael's fingers, the other gripping Lucien's sleeve as if anchoring both monsters to himself. The people adored him instantly. A child born of legend, of scandal, of devotion fierce enough to bend an empire. Stand still, Kael murmured under his breath as Elias fidgeted. I am, Elias whispered back loudly. It's the crown that's moving. Lucien laughed, open, unguarded, earning shocked looks from nobles who still struggled to reconcile the terrifying emperor with the man who bent instantly at his family's whim. Kael smirked. You're encouraging him. Lucien leaned closer. He's perfect. The palace learned quickly. Ministers who tried to bypass Kael found their petitions mysteriously delayed. Nobles who underestimated the empress consort discovered that sarcasm could cut deeper than any blade. Kael never raised his voice. He never had to. Lucien watched him with a hunger that had softened into something deeper, something steadier, but no less possessive. His hand was always at Kael's back, his attention never straying far, his authority absolute, and gladly surrendered where Kael was concerned. At night, when the palace quieted, Lucien would kneel before Kael without being asked, resting his head against Kael's thigh, as though the throne itself were nothing compared to this. My emperor, Kael would tease softly. My heart, Lucien would answer without hesitation. 8 months into their marriage. The announcement came at dawn. Kael stood on the palace balcony beside Lucien, hand resting over his stomach, expression serene. The healer's words still echoed in his mind. Another life, strong, thriving. The herald's voice rang across the capital. By decree of His Imperial Majesty and the Empress Consort, rejoice, the crown is blessed once more. An heir grows within the Empress. The city erupted. Cheers rolled like thunder through the streets, bells rang, flowers were thrown skyward. Lucien went utterly still, then turned to Kael with an expression so naked it stole Kael's breath. You... Lucien swallowed. You're sure? Kael arched a brow. Would I lie about this? Lucien laughed, then promptly dropped to one knee, pressing his lips reverently to Kael's hand in full view of the court. "My Alpha," he whispered. "My miracle." Elias gasped dramatically. "I'm getting a sibling?" Kael laughed. "Try not to teach them chaos." Lucien smirked. Too late. That night, as fireworks lit the sky, Kael stood at the window, watching the Empire celebrate him. Lucien came up behind him, arms wrapping around Kael's waist, possessive and warm. "They fear you," Lucien murmured. Kael leaned back into him. "They should." Lucien smiled against his shoulder. The world had finally learned the truth. The Enigma Emperor was powerful, terrifying, unyielding, but the Alpha who loved him. He was the one who had planned it all, and the Empire had never been safer.